you. So, I am Amesh Gusai. Will be conducting this series of session on your behavior. So, today this series we have run till now to the last part session of and take up the last part. Just a quick recap of what we have done, and then we take. Okay, so our session for defining what is organization behavior. We try to find out why do we need to learn what is relevant ahead by identifying OB exists or could be learned layers. Now, when we are saying three layers, learning is of three layers, but they're kind of mingled and with each other. Three which we were learning was one behavior, two behavior, and third level that includes the structure. Correct? In the individual behavior, we talked about decision, perception, motivation, motivational drive. These are things that we discuss individual behavior. Layer that what are groups, what are teams, how are they? We discussed motivational strategies when and relating with people. We also held up that people when they are individually the different than group. So they are related motivational theories and try to apply it from the job front. We spoke about timing, about the time, the other program, the reward program, the compensation kind of perks and benefits, the influence. We also discussed motivational theories, be it Maslow's or the Heisenberg's model, how we can apply it from a and try to identify certain key characteristics of high performing teams. And then we moved on to the third layer, organizational structure. That was we started yesterday, and there we discussed what kind of organizational structure have, how in terms of departmentalization, institutionalization, chain of command. These are the characteristics. Now, behavior as well. We also examples of these and the companies, be it right from Yahoo, Amazon, how line of command, and we also saw the cultural implications as well from an organizational structure perspective. This is what we have done. Today, in our last concluding part or concluding session after these video lectures would be deal on culture. The organization will spend around 45 minutes to an hour or so on understanding culture and values of the organization. This is one chunk of the session that would be addressing. So the first let's start off with by organizational culture. It has that when organization marketplace competition, your product, your branding mixes, and so on and so forth. They say you can never copy culture. So very important. What does that mean? It cannot accompany culture. For the simple culture doesn't come line. Developed over a period of time and it conscious attempts. So culture, yesterday when discussing about organizational structure, we saw how really cultures influences the structure and how structure also influences culture. But we more thing about the culture that exists in an organization, and it is so very important. When you look at organizational culture, because culture encompasses people, teams, organization, how do they impact? Okay, what are we going to do? First, we will in organizational culture to how the institution level by nature and describe its characteristics. So when culture organization, so what is it? What characteristics includes? Or culture is good. So what are the evaluation criteria when we say culture as well? We'll compare the functional and dysfunctional effects of culture. We'll look into the advantage culture and also the flip of a strong culture as well on people and their organization. and sustain the organizational culture. First, how is culture formed? One, we will all look into how it is sustained in a period of time. So culture is transformed. Now since organization employs and go, we will look into how a kind of is trans or communicate people as well, take it ahead in their workstations. Will also ethical culture can be created. Now in today's world, across companies people speak of ethics has changed multifold in the last couple of decades or so. So how ethics and values could be incorporated. Will also positive will describe a positive organizational culture. What are characteristics of a spiritual culture? This is something that is spiritual perspective. When we say view the spiritual culture or two or so, they say doing a more. So we speak about the spirituals within the organization that also is culture. Will characteristics of spiritual culture and how nature may an organizational culture is transported to different countries. So we'll also look into how the of a nation defines the culture of as well. They are the kind of intermingled and intent as well. Such described and discussed in the coming hour or so. Okay. So let's come. So when organizational culture will start with the institutionalized and let's understand what is institutionalization. It's a forerunner of it is something that institutionalization. Forerunner of culture when organization takes a life of its own, a part members becomes valued for its immortality. It means when institutionalization starts off at a very level. So it starts at a very small level, and then that's precisely the biggest runner. That means point. Thereon, it kind of expands across. Institutionalization, organization. In organizational culture, common perception, organization member, a system of shared meaning. So we had discussed this aspect about the meaning. When we say meaning, I would like to say that the meaning that you give is the instinct to live. I repeat, the meaning give to X the that means whatever meaning that we are given to word, to people, to company, the kind of behavior. When we speak of culture, shared meanings of attributes of members. I repeat of organizer, it means shared meaning. Now I mentioned earlier as well, means now thought could be a belief, it could be a vision. Now these of values element among cross section of people in the organization. Example. Tell me students, speak of creativity. I repeat, when we speak of creativity, which comes to your mind? Speak of creativity. Understand that all companies are creative in their own ways, but which is one company that themselves for creativity. If some of the guys have Apple. Now Apple as an organization has really marketed that organization and also shared meaning they have given organizational members. So that exists between its employees forms the culture. It need not necessarily meaning. It could be now the I mentioned could be a value, could be a group behavior, any of those. Now what are those meanings? Primary care or meaning given, number variation and risk taking. So some people have a sense of now and risk taking to attention to industry specific, but some come very much clear. They must of details to look into it. Outcome people are damn outcome oriented. Now Say for example, GE, General Electric, they were oriented. That's one of the prime reasons they kind of grown up. They are very much outcome oriented, people oriented. Now, some companies, take example, yes, their orientation for people. Now, people orientation need not necessarily an external customer. It also means internal customer, or it could be team orientation. Now, certain companies are very much bound. Now, all of the Japanese companies category, be it Sony or majority of Southeast Asian countries, maybe a as well. So they are orientation or some aggressiveness. Some companies are of decisioning, moving at the mark, having the first, the aggressor. Or some people, some companies are stable. They're known for their stability. Now, stability here means the kind of one, it could be the tenure of the employee. That means once people join, they don't leave the stable organization for a long length of time. So these are the 7 characteristics, but there could be more about certain that exist with. So home, if you're already working for an organization, figure out culture has in terms of characteristic. Now it could be one among these. So figure out for yourself and suppose working, say for example, pick up finds that you read about, know, or see advertisement about as hoardings or TV commercials. Figure out and find out what kind of that company exists. That is interesting. Great. Now, the next question. Now, question is, we will discuss culture by asking lots of questions. One, do organizations have unique descriptive term? It may act as a sub for formalization. Culture, seen as a noun. It is a noun when we speak about parts of speech. But culture is ever evolving. It is dynamic. So in that sense, it's a verb. So do cultures have uniform culture? So to an extent, yes as well. Because so if you want to understand this question, we need to culture at different levels because it is dynamic as we mentioned. So one, within a culture, we have a dominant. Now what does dominant? Dominant culture means it expresses the core that are shared by the majority of organizational members. Now, so values, that things, that importance, these are things. There could be within the dominant culture subcultures as well. Now, cultures typically defined by department and geographical. That, for example, the MNC. Now, in an MNC, there might be a dominant culture. Let's for example, that Apple might have a dominant creativity across the globe. But when they operate level, and they might have many cultures which are distinct and yet separate from the mother core values. Now, values are the primary or dominant values that are throughout the organization. Now, core values are those things that people, okay, this is it. We cannot go against it. Say for example, of environmental safety. So certain companies have designed core values, or could be environmental safety or go. So for these have a strict no, not doing certain things. Strong culture. Now strong culture is a culture in which core values are intensely held and widely shared. Now value comes core value, kind of taken it next level as well. So the culture layers from right from dominant culture, subcultures, and strong culture. Great. So what do cultures do? Now the question definitely exists because what do, so even when we are saying a culture cannot be by a competitor, so how does it make a difference? Or what does culture do? Culture, number one, it defines about and the other. In short words, what culture is is uniqueness organization, which is distinct from the other organization, stand out. It is different. Now tell me, in this highly competent, important? Yes, it kind of registers you say from the others, particular context, maybe particular, whatever the case might be. But today, being distinct, being having a separate identity, is so very important. Yes, great. Two ways of identity. Now, a culture live shared to all employees as well, where employees themselves are also about it. They're kind of charged up about it. Across the globe, they are very proud to be associated to part of Tata's, because that's the culture that they have transmitted within the employees for close to more than 50, 80 years. They go to maybe a Tata Motors or a TCS or any of those subsidiary companies. So it volumes about what they do. The generate commitment something larger than self-interest. Tend to understand, friends, when we speak of organizational behavior, also looking at come under one Roman organization together, intention should be more than money and the tangible finance. Because if that is the only thing that is a common linkage for people around, then one becomes more than 11. Bonding comes into the picture. That's where your identity and your walk and going the aisle comes into the picture. So when that happens, people deliver excellence, and that's what makes the difference. It enhances social system. Now, culture is there in groups. What happens is they together. Then, when people have strong cultures, they kind of speak to each other. They speak language as a, for example, Tata, GE, Oracle family. Speak about family. Also about from Maslow that we are social beings. We want social. So people are socially connected as well. It's sense making and control mechanisms for fitting employees in the organization. So it also looks into how people could fit it in. So this is what now culture. It also does something. It also does official as well. So can culture be a liability? So inside we saw how that. Now can culture be a liability? Yes, it could be. Friends, number one, yes to change. Yes to change means change of continuous change. In fact, so when change happens and there's a need for change, because of itself can block the process of change. An example, for company is say stability. The dominant culture change that is of change of maybe technology or people around, then people will not fit because barrier to change or barrier to diversity. A strong culture put pressure on employees to conformity principle about the group, and so people will not want newer to come because they are formed in a social net. So that might be a challenge. Barriers to and mergers. We are JVs, joint ventures and acquisitions, isn't it? We always speak across industry. You will find that some company has taken over so company, or somewhere a joint venture has happened. Be it banking, be it automobiles, be it any of those industries. So in culture can do an successful. So sometimes analysts work out JVs or even acquisition for that matter. The people who are in people to the compatibility match of cultures, because when two different cultures come together for an acquisition of JV, it can use in the way people think. When CEO took over Indian pharma company, Sankyo is a Japanese. So when took over two different cultures, although they are Asian countries, but the culture that exists were very different, and it couldn't last long. It didn't last it for 2-3 months, and ran again by Sun from Sankyo. So difference in culture can really mess it up. There were definitely, but one of the factors was culture as well. How does culture begin? Where does this actually? It stems from actions of the founders. It's a very clear fact that the founder members uh, put the foundation for culture as well. The founders hire and only employees who think the same way they do. It's a common tendency that the belief system, value system of the founders are also reflected in the people whom they work with. In fact, they recruit those kind of people only share the same ideology and belief system. Because if they themselves are not on the same page, they might be removed of the system pretty soon. So one is that. Two, founders indoctrinate or penetrate and socialize these employees to the ways of thinking and feeling. So the founder members also see to it that they perpetuate or penetrate those things to the employees as well. And the founder's own behavior act as a role model that encourages employees to identify with them and thereby internalize their beliefs, values, and assumptions. Now, what happens as the company moves on is the founder members themselves act as role models, by which the employees who are working together kind of imitate that by being associating to each other, because they are a strong reference point for the employees, and they are also, with the power of authority, it becomes very strong model to copy or imitate, if I am to say that word. So this is how keeping culture alive. Now this is of culture, but it has to be kept alive as well, because not every employee is in touch with the founder members. So the premise starts with selection itself, where it is concerned with how well the candidates will fit into the organization. We look into how the selection criteria itself is put together that way. It provides information to candidates about the organization. So before the candidate is actually rolled in the organization, he's already briefed about what kind of culture that exists within the organization. Top management. So one is selection, second top management, where senior executives help establish behavioral norms that are adopted by the organization. Here, suppose an employee joined very lately. He might not be in touch with the founder or span of control, but he looks forward for the top management. So if top management start their talk or start demonstrating those behaviors of values, redemption, that is for them that something that they copy from the management. Socialization. Socialization is a process that helps new employees adapt to the organizational culture. So socialization means various kind of people are coming together or pulled in together, where they're connected with each other and form groups as well. Stages in the socialization process. Now, what all stages are involved in the socialization process when people are coming together? One, the pre-arrival. Pre-arrival is the period of learning prior to new employee joining the organization. So, in terms of nailers, in terms of feedback that are given, the pre-arrival period forms the stepping stone for formation of culture. Encounter. This is the actual point of time of entering people. Here, when the new employee sees what the organization is like and confronts the possibility that expectation reality may diverge. So this is the point of contact. This is the actual point of contact where the individual or candidate actually sees the person as well, sees what is happening in the organization. So the whatever perception he had about the organization and is now driving it together, he will continue. So that's where the encounter happens. And the third is the metamorphosis. Metamorphosis at the main signifies when the new employee changes and adjusts to the work group and the organization. For example, let's take an example to understand this. Now, say for example, organization, top cultural value for a particular organization is say honesty. And for them, the definition is always being truthful, always saying the truth, always being loyal. Now, this is what at a pre-arrival stage people are aware of, have read on the website. And when they come and actually start working in a particular organization, and if you find people within the work context that people are honest, they always raise the truth. People admit mistakes by raising hands, even the superiors. Management people, he feels this is something that he also need to live by. So even if that particular person might not be that honest, but he metamorphosis happens at his level, and he starts adjusting his own behavior to his team, to his organization. That's how the process of socialization helps to form a part of culture. The socialization option, that means how could socialization happen, are the alternatives could be formal versus informal. Formal is within the job front or job location. Informal is when people have get-togethers or picnics or outbound programs. It could be individual versus collective. So it could be one-on-one briefing between people, one, or it could be a collective endeavor as well when they are working in teams. Or it could be fixed versus variable. Or it could be serial versus random. Or it could be investors versus divestors in each of these cases. The outcomes when we see of this socialization is higher productivity, higher commitment, and lower turnover. Lower turnover here means lower attrition. So that's precisely the reason when HR people or HR teams organize these team events or outdoor picnics going together, a lot of gelling happened. And when we say gelling, it is not only about relating to each other, but also about transmitting the organizational values. Like when peer groups say, okay, this is something that is acceptable, or this is something that is not acceptable at all. If these are things, then in a non-social environment or an informal environment, these learnings are taken very fast, and these are imbibed in the people as well very fast. So these are the socialization options that our people have in terms of setting the culture, and the objective culture does is it gains higher production and lower attrition. Okay, in a summary, when we want to figure out in a summary how organizational culture form, what we have discussed is organizational cultures are derived from founder. We have found that cultures come from the founding member. They are taken by the management ahead, and they are metamorphized into teams to form from socialization. They are sustained throughout managerial action as well. So in terms of implementation of that particular culture, the entire team of management and operational level is important to take the culture ahead to each and every member. This is what we had done. And how I learned, now it could be through storytelling is a great art. Now stories people have used across centuries, not only from an organizational context, but human beings relate to stories very well. Now see all religious texts, They are all stories. People relate to stories. But from a childhood as well, the biggest value that has come to us are by stories, isn't it? Similarly, organizational values could be mentioned through stories, stories about past history, or it could be rituals. Rituals are repetitive sequence of activity that express and reinforce the key values of organization. Now, rituals could be the organizational prayer or organizational slogan, could be one thing that reinforces the value, because they say repetition is power. So repetition gives and reinforces the culture back forth. It could be material symbols like acceptable attire, office size, opulence of the office furnishing, and executive perks that convey to employees that who is important in the organization. So it could be the office size, it could be the symbol, it could be any of those that signifies culture, or it could be the language itself, wherein jargons and special ways of expressing oneself to indicate membership in the organization. That certain people, if you read the designation of certain companies, they are kind of very jazzy, and that is something that people take by to the heart. For example, master executives or master managers, some are jazzy designation that people give, and that itself is symbolic of the culture that companies. For example, in certain companies, they are referred as geniuses if it's an R&D company. So, how employees learn culture? It could be through stories, it could be through rituals, material symbols, or language. Creating an ethical organizational culture. So, now in today's world, it is so very important to build an organization on ethical values. So, characteristics of organizations that develop high ethical standards. Now, when we say companies with high ethical moral values, what are the characteristics? And the characteristics, when we speak of ethics, are number one, high tolerance to risk. Now, when we speak of organizations, we know that businesses are done and made in a risk environment. Any business is a risky affair. Now, as a part of culture, if you can take risk or if you can manage risk and handle risk better, that's important. Or it could be the level of aggressiveness, low to moderate, or it could be a focus on means and well as outcomes. So it is not only about being result orientation, but it is also about how are you taking the means. So it is not only about results, but also about processes. So it's not only about getting the numbers, but are you following the processes? And students, tell me why processes are important in results. For the simple reason that consistent processes will give consistent results. Now, when we are speaking of means over here, sometimes you might get results even without process or following the correct process. You might get results, but consistency will not get. You can get results by a fluke, but if your value system is not there with those results, you might not get consistent results, and you get the ups and downs of results. And is consistency important for business? Very much, because we want predictability as well. Now, what are certain managerial practices that promotes an ethical culture? Certain managerial practices that promote ethical culture are: number one, being a visible role model. Now, suppose in a company, if you're promoting as one of the subculture being just-in-time approach or being punctual. Punctuality, suppose, is something that people really live by. If that is part of one of the culture statement, for example, and if a manager, a senior manager for that example, he himself is never on time and he always suppose speaks about being on time. So it doesn't then perpetuate that, isn't it? So it's about walking the talk. You have to demonstrate your ideology, not just by talking, but by doing things. So being a visible role model, communicating ethical expectations. So it's not only about living that, but with your team, communicate that, repeat it many times over. Providing ethical training. So a lot of these days companies do train their employees for ethics and values as well. Rewarding ethical acts. So there are reward statements for ethical acts, and also punishing unethical acts as well. It's also about punishing which is not fair. Providing protective mechanisms for each of these as well is one of the ways how we create ethical culture within organization. We'll also speak about how to develop a positive digital culture and to figure out and discuss what are the characteristics about positive culture. So when we speak of a positive culture that builds on employee strengths. Now we are going subtle at a behavioral level. Now we are understanding, we are special. Because it encompasses individuals as well. So if a company has a culture that builds an employee strength, means its focus is on discovering, sharing and building on the strengths of individual employees. So now we know that every individual has their strengths. Now if a company's culture is identifying and playing with lots of individual strengths, it makes a hell lot of difference. It is based on the philosophy that some companies or cultures have the philosophy of catching the employees right. Normally what happens is people normally catch the employees wrong. Means if you have not done, you will be targeted, you will be focused, you will be cornered. I'm not saying it should not be done. The point is, if this is always what you do, then you are catching the employee wrong. The other way to look at it is catching the employees right. Means what? Means whenever an employee does well, appreciate him, catch him there, appreciate in public, dissipate this information to teams as well. It's so very important. They say that if you're expecting a great work, you will get a great work. Otherwise, you will not. Reward more than it punishes. That means articulate praise and catching employees doing something right, as we discussed. Emphasize individual vitality and growth. Friends, understand, whenever you work for organization, it's important that growth is an inherent characteristic of an individual. If as a manager or as an organization itself, where an organization gives an environment where it provides an individual for growth, it really propels and helps him to flourish and explore. Help employees learn and grow in their jobs and careers. Limits of a positive culture, there are certain liabilities about it, and those may not work for all organizations. So when we are saying catching the employees right, it is contextual as well. We have to see the cultural context as well, the topographic location as well, what kind of industry, what kind of people, the intellectual or not so intellectual, the blue collar or the white collar. So it depends on all those factors as well. So we have to look into in perspective when we are looking at creating a positive organizational culture. Now, let's also speak about spirituality within the organizational culture. Now, these days we speak about spirituality, but understand, students, when we speak of spirituality, we are not speaking on religious lines. Very important point to understand. So, what does workplace spirituality mean? What are the things that encompasses the workplace spirituality? It says that it is a recognition that people have an inner life that nourishes and is nourished by meaningful work that takes place in the context of a community. Now, it is important that when any individual is working, he should derive a great amount of satisfaction, or he gets a great amount of satisfaction only when he feels he is contributing to the work. He feels that he is adding value to himself and the people around. So what kind of meaning he is giving is important. It's not about organized religious practice that we are referring to when we speak of spirituality. People seek to find meaning and purpose in their work. Understand, students, that people spend almost 6 to 8 hours of their everyday working life, 5 days a week or 6 days a week, for almost 30 to 35 years, maybe in a single organization or maybe 2 or 3 organizations. So the point is that is some chunk of time that a particular person is spending alongside people around, and that's also constituted of family, isn't it? 6 to 7 hours, 5 days a week for 30 years is some time. So in that point of time, when people are working together alongside different people, he should be able to find meaning in his job. He should be feeling enriched about his job, and that's so very important to understand. So why spirituality now, or why this concept is crept in thick and fast now? As a counterbalance to the pressure and stress of the turbulent pace of life and the lack of community, may people feel their increased need for involvement and connection. I mentioned 6 to 8 hours per day, 30 years, 5 times a week. We are social beings. We need connection. We need relatedness to the people around. That itself satisfies or nourishes the soul at some level. That is precisely the reason these days we speak about work-life balance. These days we speak about adding more value to your work. Formalized religion hasn't worked for actually many people. Job demands have made the workplace a dominant in many people's life because of the commuting time, the travel time, the actual workplace time. Yet they continue to question the meaning of life. So it's about addressing the Maslow's top end of the pyramid when we speaking of self-actualization. End of the day, a person definitely asks this question: what is my journey all about? What is my purpose of living? What is it that I want to do in life? Now these questions are the Maslow's top end of the pyramid. Now, when people start addressing and finding these questions, it is better that these questions are also addressed at the workplace. Now, suppose if they are coming to job just to get the salaries, the sense of relatedness is not there, the sense of purpose is not there. So when people start relating, even at their job front, the higher meanings of their purpose of life, then it's more connectedness, it's more relatedness as well. The desire to integrate personal life values with one's professional life values. A lot of time, a lot of books have been written, a lot of videos have been said that you keep the people, the personal life and professional life separate. Now, easily said than done, but the point is we are one being. We just cannot separate it. Yeah, you manage that well, yes, but we cannot separate it out because we are one being. And the point is how you integrate the values together. It should not happen. The personal life values are very different from the organizational life values. uh, Especially if they're contrasting, you might be in conflict or a cognitive dissonance that spoke about. So it's important that how do you integrate the personal values and the organizational values together so they're whole. An increased number of people are finding that the pursuit of more material acquisitions leaves them unfulfilled. Now, students, it's so very important to understand that some people think earning money is the sole purpose of life. Now, if this is the only meaning people give to life, then end of the day, people feel hollow. That means they might earn crores of rupees or billions of dollars, but there is no internal contentment and fulfillment. There is always a sense of hollowness inside, and that is not part of getting along. Need to understand these dynamics as well. So we need to understand that we are looking life at a larger perspective as well. So when we speak of characteristics, what are the characteristics of a spiritual organization? It is concerned with helping people develop and reach their full potentials. So it's when we speak about doing a mojo in organization or doing a spiritual work at the organization level, so we are identifying growth areas that people feel passionate about within the work context as well. It directly addresses problems created by work-life conflict. It should not happen that work and life are at different levels altogether. So we are trying to integrate it. We never say that we'll come on the same page, but we are minimizing the level of dissonance or difference. The four characteristics of spiritual organization. So when we speak about what are the characteristics of an organization being spiritual, what are the characteristics? And those are strong sense of purpose. Now, it is said that if going for work, you don't have a higher purpose, then getting excellent results is a distant reality. They always say, it is always mentioned that you should always do what you love. I repeat, the phrase says that you should always do what you love, or else you start loving what you do. Because if you don't love what you're doing, you kind of are not doing justice to your job. That means you find higher purpose, give different meanings to your job, which are more enriching, which are more challenging, which kind of unleashes you to a different kind of level altogether. Second, trust and respect. Now, working organization is so very important. Trust is a very inherent part of being. We always want to be trusted as human beings, and that's something that's soul nourishing, and so is respect. The third character is the humanistic work practices. That means when we are living in organization or working in organization, it is not about only working for self. So being human means also how you can contribute to people around, what kind of services you can offer, and that's precisely the reason there's always CSR initiatives that are being done in organizations, isn't it? The corporate social responsibility. It's about contributing. It's about reaching out to people along even while doing business. And the fourth element is about toleration of employees' expression. That means it's not only about what you get out of the job, but as you are working, who are you becoming internally as an individual? Now, what is it that you have become which was not there 5 years back if you're working in an organization? So, what is it that organization has given you at a spiritual dimension in terms of growth, in terms of awareness, in terms of actualization of potentials, in terms of expression of potentials? So, four characteristics of spiritual organizations are strong sense of purpose, trust and respect, humanistic work practices, and toleration of employee expression. Now, there are definitely critics about spirituality, and those are: number one, whether it is a scientific foundation, we never really don't know, it's still debatable. Are spiritual organizations legitimate in the context that spirituality is not about God or any religious values? It is an attempt to help employees find meaning and value in their work. So, whatever value the organization want to give, is it fair? Is something that is put to challenge. Are spirituality and profits compatible? So, we are doing business. Now, one of the reasons of doing business for organization is gain profit. So, on one end, when we are speaking of contribution, of reaching out and helping out, are profits. Now, are they compatible? Initial evidence suggests that they are, because we live in a sense of abundance. Spirituality may result in greater productivity and dramatically lower turnover as well. Because when people live in a sense of purpose, people live with great amount of vision as well. The global implications when we speak about spirituality are: organizational cultures, while strong, can't ignore the local culture that exists. That means managers should be more culturally sensitive by speaking slowly in a lower tone. That shows respect as well. Listening more than speaking more. Avoiding discussion on religion or politics because it's too personal in nature. Or all global forms need to be more culturally sensitive. So when we speak of spirituality also, it also means about being tolerant to people around, tolerant to different kind of views, tolerant to different kind of expressions as well. Cultures as an intervening variable. Employees form an overall subjective perception of the organization based on these objective factors, and the opinions formed affect employee performance and satisfaction as well. Now, if you want to summarize whatever we have done as far as from a managerial perspective, culture and spirituality, strong cultures are difficult for managers to change because this is a part of entire organization coming into the picture. Simple example, if a new manager comes into an organization and the team is already set from a different culture, to bring in changes for a particular manager, it's very difficult because the entire team is part of a one culture that existed before. In a short run, strong culture should be considered fixed. Selecting new hires that fit in the organization culture is critical for motivation, job satisfaction, commitment, and turnover as well. Socialization into the corporate culture is important. And also, as a manager, your actions as a role model help create the cultural values of ethics, spirituality, and positive culture. So, from a manager perspective, it is important what kind of values you are driving around for people around so that their performance is there, their commitment value goes up and their attrition comes down. Great. So this is what we had kind of discussed in terms of culture. The second aspect that would be addressing in an hour or 5 and 10 minutes more, an hour or so, would be on three aspects. Again, at an organizational level, because we are the top end of our discussion, that's about organizational structure. So three things that we'll be discussing in the coming hour or so would be change, innovation, and stress, because they all exist in any organization. Great. So the point that we'll be discussing in each of these elements would be: one, what is an organizational change? So when we speak of change, what are we speaking of from an organizational context? Two, what change strategies are used in an organization? So when we speak of change, what are certain strategies that a company use to install a change? What can be done about resistance to change? We know that change doesn't happen fast. People generally resist. So what strategies could be adopted to handle that resistance? How do organizations innovate? The second aspect. What are the factors that contribute to innovating anything? It could be a product, it could be a service. And how does stress affect people at work? So three elements, all of these we'll be defining and discussing one by one. Great. So change. Speaking of change, let me tell you that it is said that change is the element that kind of is there. Change is the only constant, they say. So when we speak of change, there are various types of changes. We have already always mentioned we are living in a dynamic environment where change is the nature of things. So what existed few years back doesn't exist today, or they are modified. So changes happen at different levels. So when we speak about forms of change, so one is a radical change. Now what is a radical change? Radical change, also known as frame breaking change. That means the change that happens in an instant. It one strike and it kind of, for example, the breaking of a glass is a radical change. So it was there, the glass, it breaks down, crashes on the floor into pieces. Change happening, the change of form happening in pieces. It's a radical change. Two, change that result in a major overhaul of the organization and its component systems. So certain changes happen with a click of the moment. It happens so very fast. Now, technological changes are that way. They say that as far as technological changes are concerned, the big overall changes, that means the last 10 years, the technological revolution that happened was as equivalent to last 1,000 years. Now, I hope you're getting the difference. I repeat, the last 10 years of change that happened is as equivalent to the last 100 years of technological change innovation. So that itself means what kind of turbulent environment that we are living in terms of change. The change is fast, is instant, and especially when we speak of technological change, it is of that kind. But not all changes are that way. The second is the incremental change. Now, where changes are small, they are baby steps. A lot of time, the incremental changes are something that people don't come to realize unless it is observed through an external reference. It is as equivalent to, for example, a family. When some few relatives meet them, maybe after a few years, they mention, "Oh, your child has become so big. We never got to know this. So he has become so tall, isn't it? And within the family, you don't realize because you are watching him as a child every day. So we don't realize that change because they're incremental, they're small. Organization systems also have small changes built in. So also as frame bending and change that is part of organizational natural evolution. This change every organization goes through. Now what are the change agents? Change agents are where individuals and groups who take responsibility for changing the existing behavior patterns of another person or social system. So it could be a person or the organization. Sometimes hired as an outside consultant. Sometimes they are part of the system and sometimes they are hired outside. Managers and leaders in contemporary organization are expected to be change agents because all organizations goes through incremental or radical changes throughout their journey. For good managers, they need to be change agents because they need to influence their team or persuade that team to adapt and be flexible enough to take their team together to the new environment of a new change process. Now, what is organizational change? Now, organizational change, it could be unplanned change, where the incremental change that happens, where it occurs spontaneously or randomly, may be disruptive or beneficial. The appropriate goal is to act quickly to minimize any negative consequences and maximize any possible benefit. So one, it could be unplanned change, or the second, it could be a planned change. Now what are these planned change? Planned change is a result of specific efforts by a change agent. They are kind of intervention brought in by a person or a group. A performance gap is a direct response to a perceived performance gap, where when we want to take a particular system, a process from here to there, the change. A discrepancy between the actual and the desired state of affairs and may reflect problems or opportunity. The change is happening because from a business perspective, we are looking at the tangible benefits that could be derived as well. Now, there are various forces that cause change. The organizational force, as we call it. So, the organizational force is, it could be organizational environmental relationship that might be the cause, or the organizational life cycle itself. Now, we mentioned that for any change process, every organization goes through a cyclic period of change, right? From, if you recollect, when we were dealing with teams, it starts with formalization, normalization, the performance period, and the disruptive period. Now, these formation of the cycle of team also forms a part of organizational cycle, where the formation is there, normalization is there, the performance phase is there, and the destruction phase. Now all these are intertwined together. So it could be part of organizational life cycle, or the political nature of the organization itself might cause that way. For example, the change of leadership. For example, if it's a family-owned business, and if the next generation takes over the reins of the organization, then political changes do exist in terms of people, system, functioning, processes, etc. Now, what is an organizational change? Now, the organizational targets for change. So, whenever it's a planned change, these all factors are looked in for change. One, the purpose. Why do we want to change? The objectives. the strategies to change, the culture. Is there a need to change the culture itself, or the people, task, structure of the organization, or the technology with which the organization runs? So change could happen in any of these areas. Now, phases of a plan change. Now we are all discussing in terms of plan change. The stages are: 1, it starts with unfreezing, changing, refreezing. So when we are speaking of plan change, 3 steps or 3 layers. Step 1, unfreezing. Step 2, changing. Step 3, again refreezing. So what do we do in unfreezing? In unfreezing, it's preparing a situation for change by disconfirming existing attitudes and behavior. In unfreezing, a clear communication goes up. This is not happening here on. So we are actually communicating we want to change of attitude. Susceptibility to boiled frog phenomena. Boiled frog phenomena, we know, in a glass bowl of water, frog is kept and the entire tumbler is kept on a gas. Now a frog, while on the burner, doesn't understand the change. Externally we can say it's on the burner, and he doesn't make any movement about it. But as the temperature starts beginning up and as the water starts boiling, he then makes an attempt to jump off the glass tumbler. But by then it's too late and he can't adapt to the changes. So when we are speaking of unfreezing, we are creating an attitude where when people are communicated to have the approach for change or newness to come in. Then the actual changing, where taking action to modify a situation by altering the targets of change. And second, refreezing, where maintaining and eventually institutionalizing the actual change. We refreeze it. The action research. Now it has been seen that whenever in any change process, the process steps are diagnosis. We are speaking of all planned changes, students. So 1, diagnosis, where a change need to happen. 2, analysis. 3, feedback. 4, action of change. Evaluation, how the changes worked as feedback. And action research benefits are problem focused rather than solution oriented, and heavy employee involvement reduces resistance to change. So when we are looking at the change process, we have to involve people as well in the process. So very important. So at a strategy level, what all tools do we have? So what change strategies do we have in organization? 1, it could be a forced coercion strategy. Now what is a forced coercion strategy? Forced coercion strategy draws on reward power, coercive power, and legitimate power that primary inducing change, where the change process is driven across, where it is said that it has to be, the force is kind of executed in, the force is installed in as well. The change agent acts unilaterally to command change. That means we are not here in this process of forced coercion strategy. There is no people involvement. It is said directly, okay, this is happening, this is need to be done, do it. There is no feedback loop coming in. Usually results in temporary compliance. So if it's a short-term activity, it's good, but if it's a long-term, the compliance is poor. The second strategy could be a rational persuasion strategy. The word itself signifies what it is. Rational, also known as empirical rational strategy. It draws on expert power as primary inducement to change, wherein the change agent uses specialized knowledge, support and rational arrangement. The change agent gives the logic and the details why a change needs to be there, and then usually he go on to persuade by selling his logic to the people concerned, and that's where the rational persuasion strategy happens. And the third is a shared power strategy. So what does happen in shared power strategy? Here, also known as normative re-educative approach, herein is draws on referent powers as a primary inducent to change, wherein it kind of empowers people, educates people for change as well. The change agent empowers people affected by the change and involves them in decision making related to change. So here people are also involved in the change process as well, and usually results in long-term internalization. So if you're looking at plant changes systematically organized in a layered fashion, the shared power strategy really works well. Great. Then we move on. One of the other methods that we have for change as a process is called as OD. One of the measures that is strongly used, or organizational development. Now what is this organizational development? Organizational development is a collection of planned interventions built on humanistic democratic values that seeks to inspire organizational effectiveness. So they are planned interventions, and these, when we speak of organizational development, the values that it lives by are respect for people, trust and support, power equalization, confrontation when required, and participation. So it's a kind of mixed bag. Let's look into the stages that it has. The 6 OD techniques are: 1, it could be sensitivity training. So what does it happen in sensitivity training? In sensitivity training, what happens is training groups, or they're called as T groups, that seeks to change behavior through unstructured group interaction. So whenever a change is coming up, there are training happen to sensitize the importance of change. It could be provide increased awareness of others and self. So a lot of socialization happens at this point of time. Increase empathy with others. Listening skill and openness are there, and tolerance for others. This is what happens. One of the steps, it could be either sensitive training. So whenever a change is happening, people install sensitivity groups to come and relate to people around as well. Second is survey feedback approach. This is all part of OD techniques, or organizational development techniques. Second could be survey feedback approach. In survey feedback approach, here the use of questionnaires to identify discrepancies among member perceptions. Discussion follows and remedies are suggested. So questionnaires are sent, feedbacks are taken as well to see how things work on. Or it could be a process consultation, wherein a consultant gives a client insights of what is going on within industry, outside of industry, the prevalent trends between the client and other people, and identifies processes that needs improvement. So it's a kind of process consultation where specialists come into the picture, into the loop, and use them as well. Or it could be team building measures. So OD interventions where trainings are conducted for team building. So maybe once in a year, twice in a year, they're taken to resorts and given team building programs, wherein high interaction among team members to increase trust and openness. It could be intergroup development as well. In intergroup development, OD efforts to change the attitude, stereotypes and perceptions that group have for each other. And also, one of the other tools that an OD intervention can have is the appreciative inquiry. One of the very recent tools of OD measure. What do we do in appreciative inquiry? Herein, it seeks to identify the unique qualities and special strengths of an organization, which can then be built to improve performance. So, the first question in an appreciative inquiry is not about what's going wrong. In an appreciative inquiry, the questions asked are, okay, even this tough environment, what's going right? What are things that we are good at? What are things that we can rely on? What is our greatest strength area? What has worked for us? This is where appreciative inquiry begins in. It starts as discovering, recalling the strengths of the organization, dreaming from there on, like, okay, if this is what we are good at, what we can still do great about it. So it's about speculating on the future of the organization. Design, that means finding a common vision, and destiny, deciding how to fulfill that dream. So one of the measures could be OD intervention when we are looking at change. Great. Now, we know that change is something that generally people don't like it. So the first response to change is resistance. And what can be done for resistance for change? One, any attitude or behavior that indicates unwillingness to make or support a desired change is resistance. An alternative view of resistance could be sometimes that must be overcome to change for successful. So if you want to be successful to install the change, we need to overcome that resistance. Feedback that can be used to facilitate achieving change objectives. So one of the OD things that we discussed about getting a feedback through survey questionnaire could be used to integrate the learning as well. Now, this is a good little feedback that comes from the topic of why do we resist to change. Now, this change that we are referring to is not only about organizational change, all changes. Why do people resist change? And some very interesting insights. And these all apply to us as well in different contexts. And these are, number one, fear of unknown. Now, people generally don't do something else because of the fear of unknown. Never know what lies beyond, or lack of good information. Sometimes people don't take steps about it because there is not enough data, there is not enough knowledge about that particular phase about it, or fear of loss of security. Now it could be also that sometimes people wonder, whatever I am doing in school, why do I need to change? Or why do I need to change the system? It's happening. Yes or no? Or why there's a reason to change? I'm happy with it. Or fear for loss of power. People sometimes feel currently whatever I'm doing, I have a sense of power, whatever power I have still. But if I change, would I still own the power? Would I still have the power to influence others? Or lack of resources. Now, sometimes people don't change because they feel that the resources are less. Resources could be infrastructure resources, Resources could be technological resources, resource could be of people resource, money resource, or time resource, or bad timing. Certain time, people feel about the timing is important for change, or the habit. So a lot of time at an individual level, our habits stop us from doing new things because we as human beings are programmed beings. So what does programmed being mean? It means that human beings actually is a mixture of all habits put together, isn't it? Whatever we do are all habitual things. So to come out of the habit, it's a difficult proposition. So that's also one of the reasons to resist change. So why don't people change? It could be fear of the unknown, lack of good information, fear of loss of security, no reason to change, or fear of loss of power, lack of resource, or it could be bad timing, or it could be habit. Ways in which, now what can be done through resistance to change? There are certain things, if you see, the ways in which the resistance is experienced, ways in which the resistance is actually experienced by people around. And those are, number one, resistance to the change itself. Now, this resistance, people, whenever a new things come, by habit they will resist and say, no, we don't want this change. One. Two, resistant to change of strategy. You might say that, okay, we want to change, but maybe the strategies are not great. Or it could be the change, or maybe the person facilitating the change might not be great. So people resist changes in any of these dimensions. Now, how to deal with resistance, since we aspire to become CEOs of organization, isn't it, by doing this MBA? So we should also be equally comfortable and compatible to how do you combat this? So how to deal with resistance? Number one, educate and communication. That means one thing is, when we say communicating, speak out. What is the intention? What you want to bring about? Educate people, give them information, give them data, relate to them, gain confidence, gain trust. First step in kind of mellowing down the resistance. Two, participation involvement. If you are a change agent, be fully involved about it, as if it is your personal involvement. Helps a lot. Two, facilitation and support. Support people, encourage people, give a tap on people's shoulder, speak to them. That really helps them to kind of narrow down the resistance that people have. Negotiate an agreement. So all negotiating strategies that we have discussed when we are discussing conflict and negotiation, use that. Manipulation and cooperation sometimes are also strategies people use. Explicit and implicit coercion. So we'll discuss this one by one. One, education and communication, where it educates people about change prior to implementation and helps them understand the logic of change. So make people understand why this change is important, or what is the logic behind the change. Use when people lack information or have inaccurate information. Sometimes people don't change because they don't have data. So give them data. Advantages are, it creates willingness to help with the change. It helps them or facilitates to create intention for change. Disadvantages can be very time consuming. So communication sometimes, to communicate and reach out to many people, can be time consuming. Two, second method is participation and involvement. What do we do over here? Here, allow people to help design and